All right. Well, welcome everybody to Double Helix. It's the podcast that we like to explore all the ways connections around us have power to have an effect on our health, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or even spiritual. The more we know, the more we can become empowered, the more we can take control of our overall health. Today, we're going to dive into a fascinating world of functional medicine with DNA and exploring all the profound and the connections to our health. Our guest today is Dr. Ace Choksi. Did I say that right, Ace?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Also known, most of us call him Dr. Ace or Ace. He's one of the leading experts in the field of functional medicine and pioneering with tying DNA analysis and personalized healthcare. His practice is Ace My Health. ACE stands for Affirm, Confirm, and Experience. ACE is a process, the healthcare side of what he calls ACE is a process that connects the mind, body, and spirit at a genetic, cellular, and epigenetic level. That's a really deep sentence. In his practice, Dr. Ace brings together Eastern, Western, ancient, and modern medicine. Welcome to the show, Ace.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Mark. Thank you for having me on this.
Oh yeah. I'm super excited to have you here. We were visiting right before we started recording, and I kind of told Ace, we talked about him being a doctor in functional medicine, and in reality, weeks ago when somebody told me that you were a functional medicine doctor, to be honest with you, I had to go online and look it up. What's a functional medicine doctor, right? that's the reality because I'm an old firefighter.
Yeah.
I was a wildland firefighter for several years, and I was involved in fire since 1988 until about 3 weeks ago. So it's been a long, long haul that I've been in and around fire and emergency management. And so I say that because my mind is so Western medicine trained all the years that I was a firefighter. And in the last few years, I've just got to where I'm dipping into these whether it's alternative or whatever people look at it, and the power of stuff beyond Western medicine, from acupuncture to, I love acupuncture. That to me is just fascinating. And then all the other modalities that are out there. But functional medicine, doctor, and I'm just going to say this, Ace, and then we're going to let you do most of the talking today.
Okay.
But I looked up, for those of you that don't know, and if I'm wrong, Ace, correct me, because I'm reading what I pulled and put together for functional medicine. A
Yeah.
functional medicine doctor is a healthcare professional who uses a holistic, patient-centered approach to identify and address the root causes of chronic health conditions. Does that pretty much wrap it up?
In a in a grand scheme of things, the word functional means understanding the function. And in order to understand the function, you have to understand the parts. And if you go deeper and deeper and deeper into the parts, you can go all the way down to the genetics, all the way down to the electrons, all the way down to your thoughts in the spiritual sense, all the way backtrack it to 14 generations and really understand how
Really?
something that started 14 generations ago could have led to what you are today, because your genetics have been passed down many generations. That means the genetic code has been passed down. That means the
Right.
memories have been passed down. It's like a flash drive that just gets passed down with every time it gets transferred to a new hard drive, it gets passed down the actual program. And as the updates happen with our life, we pass those down too, right, to the next generation. So it's a functional is a word that describes somebody who looks at the function but looking at the parts to understand what the function is. And if you're trying to improve the the outcomes for any body part, any cell, any organ, then we must understand where they are. So understanding the pathology, the physiology, and looking more into little bit more into the details, like, you must like data if you're a functional you must like labs, right? It's not just about being holistic. So there are a lot of holistic docs. There are a lot of integrative docs that try to integrate a couple different modalities of care, whether it's yoga or nutrition with conventional medicine, anything that you try to integrate with alternative pathways. So there is a CAM, right? Complementary and alternative
Hmm.
medicine, and there are centers at the NIH for that. And so we can really think of that whole pathway and understand that there are different philosophies of how we look at. There's a whole world of anti-aging and precision medicine where we're looking at even more precise approach to even a little bit more than functional, because functional is going, let's say, one derivative is in, like, one step deeper than the basic labs. Functional might be hormones and some toxins. At the same time, if you go even deeper into precision medicine, then you're going down into DNA and you're going down into the cell. Then there's a cellular medicine approach. And if you combine energy medicine into this, if you combine holistic approaches to this, then we're bringing in the Eastern, Western together. We're bringing in ancient, like the past medicine, into current, today's approach, to combine it with evidence-based, safe and effective, right? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, all the practices that we do are supposed to be safe, supposed to be effective, supposed to have some evidence behind it. Because, like, somebody asked me recently, earlier today, did FDA approve some treatments, right? Whatever that we're doing.
Yeah.
And I say FDA doesn't approve anything, right? FDA clears devices. FDA approves medications, because now the classifications of the medication, it gives them classification. It's not like they say we approve this. They don't use that word. I don't think I've seen that. I've seen class one drug, class two drugs. They put them into different categories, right? You can have a what's that word? When we it will come to me, like, when we have a new drug that's still in the process, and in phase one clinical trial, phase two, then it's it's given a drug status, so you can use it for different things. But they didn't approve treatments. They approved processes that can be used. They approved medications that can be used for certain indications. They approved machines, and whether it's, you know, um, class four device to class one device, like, they're placed in different categories based on their effective and safety data. So FDA has one aspect. Then you have American Medical Association, you have Heart Association, you have family practice academies. What do they all do? They give you guidelines. They don't say we approve or disapprove of this. They just give us guidelines. Hey, look, we think, as a group of researchers and doctors, we have looked at enough evidence articles to say, hey, lisinopril should be given to this this group of people, or this person, right? Or first step in management of blood pressure is hydrochlorothiazide or amlodipine, or for diabetes it's metformin after diet and exercise, right? So diet and exercise is like the first thing, but they're just giving us guidelines. Like, they're not approving or disapproving anything. The only person that I see really approving something is insurance companies, because they have to approve the payment.
So when we, as a layperson, right? Because that's what I am. As a layperson, when we talk about FDA approved, that's, if I'm understanding correctly, that's just kind of a one all catch all for FDA having classified something or cleared a treatment or cleared a device, And as a lay people, we call it FDA approved. Am I understanding that right?
That's what we normally say that, yes, but
Okay.
they're placed in categories. And then it's up to
Yeah.
us to decide whether we want to use those things or not, right? And if we use them with our patients, like, for example, Viagra was approved, or the, the, the classification and the indications for Viagra was pulmonary hypertension, right? I mean, initially it was done for the pulmonary system, not for ED, right? But then everybody
Yeah.
started using it off label for ED because it works for ED.
That's like the Ozempic stuff for diabetics that
Yeah,
now people are using for weight losses.
for
Yeah.
weight loss. Exactly. So you can always mix and match as long as it's safe and effective, even sometimes that their long term data may not be there. But but if it's safe and effective, we can use it for non-labeled indications. And as long as patients approve, as long as doctors are, ethical in their approach and safe, then they can use those things for an outcome. And then we get to publish those, and then we do, those kind of studies and collaborate with other universities and whatnot to see if we can have a better collaborative approach for different treatments. So yeah, I mean the functional is one word. I mean, you can say I do all of these above things that we mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the accident that I was in 18 years ago.
Hmm.
Really, obviously it threw me for a loop. I spent so many years full time in a wheelchair, and it was
Hmm.
interesting that my first exposure to somebody who had gone to Western medicine school,
Hmm.
and then which is an acupuncturist, and I'll give a shout out. His name's Dr. Guy Lindsay,
Yeah. Right.
and he went from my understanding he went to like 3 years of medical school here in the U.S. and
Hmm.
decided that's not what he really wanted to do. So he ended up moving to China and studying acupuncture for 9 years.
Wow.
So he had similar to like functional medicine doctor in that sense. I'm guessing, right? But he's got that Western medicine approach. He didn't get his MD, right? But he ended up over in China studying that acupuncture. And if it wasn't for the stuff that he did, I wouldn't have been able to begin to move my left foot and
Mm-hmm.
be able to start getting out of the chair. He's the one that defied the neurologists, right?
Hmm.
That's the part that baffled me. Was yeah, I still remember the day that the first day I went and saw him, and we're sitting in his office. He asks all the questions, and of course I'm wheelchairing into his office, and he puts me over in this great big recliner, and he starts sticking needles in my arms. And the really cool thing about him is he's just this down to earth. He raises Rocky Mountain horses. He's a cowboy, right? But he's this acupuncturist. And I look at him and I'm like, "What are you doing?" I don't know if I told you, but it's my legs that's the issue, not my arms. And he starts talking, meridians and all that. And I'll be honest with you, all I could hear was Charlie Brown's teacher. You know what I mean by that, Ace, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wah, 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 wah. And I was just like, I'm totally tuning this out. But over time, I really began to realize that, wow, there was something here for what he was doing. So I think it's fascinating that functional medicine side to tie it together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's everything has a mechanism of action. Like it works by doing something. And if you understand those things, whether it's herbs, supplements, prayers, water, acupuncture, other different types of modalities like Ayurveda, yoga, they all have they all have certain way like of operating, and they
Yeah.
all have certain way that they understand the human body. So if you're able to really understand it and be non-judgmental about it as medical doctors, then we're only going to stack these different ways we see the human body on top of each other. And then we're going to decide, okay, hey, look, I think of this as based off of genetics. I also understand yoga. I can understand Ayurveda. I can understand herbs, essential oils. So then for you coming into my office, what does that mean? Right? what kind of protocol am I going to spew out of my mouth, right? My
Yeah.
recommendations are going to be all blended, and I'm going to think about all of these things to make it the most effective, the most easiest, the most safest process for you. And that's natural. Everybody does that. The more you learn, like if you're a lawyer, you're going to go through one case, but then you're going to go through another case, and then third person shows up with the same issue as the first one. Are you going to ignore what you learned from the second case? No, you're going to take what you learn as you go along the way to continue to improve your practice of being a lawyer. And and that's exactly how medicine is. Like, as doctors continue to learn, and the providers and the healers, as they continue to learn different modalities of care, different schools of thoughts, our practice of caring, essentially that's what we are. We're just caring, we're guiding, we're being the catalyst in somebody else's healing journey,
Yeah.
whether it's through medication or whether it's through supplements. Our that job becomes more efficient, better, easier, and you know and as long as we're doing it with ethical standards, and being safe and effective in that approach, and being conservative to some degree, although it doesn't sound conservative, but you kind of have to be. You take baby steps to make sure that the person is safe. So I think that's what you went through. You went from one line of thinking to another line of thinking, and suddenly you had some experience that
Yeah.
was not ignorable. And when you experience something like that, then the entire world opens up. That is just a totally different world of understanding and
Yeah,
seeing
for
how.
me, I've always been, and I joke around, and I know a lot of guys will say, "Well, I'm the biggest skeptic in the world." Well, I'm right up there with that classification of skeptic when it comes to anything outside of what we were taught was Western medicine. And so
Yeah,
it's been a fascinating thing for me. I still struggle with some things
yeah,
when it comes to all the different modalities and different things that can be done. And my wife Victoria, she recognizes that she's much further down the path of understanding and really attaching and seeing how all that works. And there's times that she has to go, okay, I know you don't believe this yet, and it's always yet.
mhm,
And so, but I'd love to visit a little bit if we can about DNA.
yeah.
And maybe if you could take a couple of minutes and just kind of explain to those people who don't understand how DNA and understanding that is so crucial to our overall health.
Okay.
That was a
So,
deep breath.
yeah, so here's what happens, right? When you buy a computer, you're looking at all the specs.
Right.
And or when you buy a new phone, some kind of a gadget, you're looking at the specs to see, hey, is this going to work really nicely and better? Then, once you have that baseline computer, which is the hardware,
Right.
then you look at the specs of the software. And then you say, okay, are the software operating? When I buy Windows or when I buy an Apple, the hardware is almost the same in both computers. It's just the software, the way presentation is different,
Mm-hmm.
the way everything interacts with each other is different. But otherwise, hardware is almost the same. They all have the screen and the
They have
battery and
keyboards and yeah, all that
keyboards, and
stuff. Yeah.
everything is the same. So the motherboard is almost the same with minor. So similar things. Our body is the hardware. As long as you're born with all the good parts without having any genetic abnormalities, we are we have the hardware. Then we add the software into it. The software is program that comes in pre-installed in us. And then we modify it over time through our life. So the software is the DNA. DNA is literally coded program of zeros and ones essentially. But in the DNA we have nucleotides, and they're made up of elements like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, nitrogen, and then that DNA is stored in a really tightly bonded way around certain proteins called histones. But it's stored. It's in the nucleus. It's all the way deep down inside the cells in another type of a nucleus, which is another cell inside a cell that protects this hardware or software, sorry, protects the software code. And then that code gets read by the machine, by the cell, and it produces an outcome that you see on your screen, that you see in your behavior. It produces this hair, it produces this color of the skin, it produces the color of the eye, it produces the nail, and produces all the tissue that we have. And we all have to, certain minor variation. And the difference between most of the humans is less than 3%, right? I mean, the difference between us and the chimpanzees is less than 3%.
Yeah.
So yeah, the code eh, is there. Even the bacteria, some of the minor parasites, and some of them, and our code is very similar. But how it's read allows us to see a different thing. In a chimpanzee, you see a chimp. In a human, you see a human because it's read differently. And what you see on the outside is the presentation that you see. You know, it's like the difference between Apple and Windows feeling. It's like the chimp and the
Yeah.
humans, right? So our genetic code is so important to us because it responds, the software responds to the inputs that we're putting in,
Yeah.
right? What I put, the inputs that I'm putting in through my webcam, through my keyboard, through the mouse, through any other sources of inputs that I have in my computer, the software responds. Same thing for our human body. We have 10 senses. We have five that you already know, right? Eyes,
Yeah.
ears, nose, touch, smell, or um, taste, touch, smell, um, taste, touch, smell, hearing,
Hearing.
and sight. So you have
Yes.
those five. Then there are five more senses that we have. So I say that we have five more. These five have organs associated with it. That's why you can tangibly see those senses. These other five, only one of them have organ. The other four do not have an organ attached to it. So it's kind of hard to see those senses. Brain is an organ.
Yeah.
It senses a lot of things. So that's sense number 10. 9 is sense of matter. If you eat a banana, banana becomes your body. That's magical power.
Yeah.
You can literally convert matter inside your body into something else. But you sense it. You can sense the smallest COVID particle or a influenza particle going in your nose, and then it sends a signal to the immune system to say, "Hey, look, some foreign thing or thing showed up in our body. Let's go fight and get rid of it before it creates a havoc." So that sense of matter. Then we have sense of time. So when you think about sense of time, everything in our body happens according to time. But there's no organ, but we have sense of time. You have sense of time. We've been talking for about 15, 20 minutes or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what time of the day it is. You can sense it. Then there's sense of space. You know how big you are. Like your body, you know how big it is. You know, even if your eyes are closed, how much space you're going to require around your body. If you move your arm, you can sense the space orientation, right? It's a sense of spatial orientation. So that sense of space. And the last one is sense of energy. So we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. So energy pretty much is like feeling somebody's blessings, feeling the Reiki energy. You felt the energy shift. Energy manipulation can happen through acupuncture or different herbs. When we are in a room with a lot of really nice people, then you have a different energy flow in that room. But if you're in a room with a lot of, you know, I guess Karens, I can say
People that aren't happy.
people that aren't happy,
Yeah.
then it's gonna be really bad. Like you're gonna feel that energy, right? The energy of a temple is different than energy of a governmental building or a jail, because people who are in there and the structure of the building creates the energy of the function and the feeling of that space. So we have all of those things. So these are signals. What you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch, all of those are signals. What you think, what you now what happens at a time level, how you manage time, space, space around you, how that looks. Then you have matter. What kind of matter are you in contact with all the time? And what you connect with? You connect with your house, but not somebody else's house. House is just a matter, but you're connecting with it. And energy. How do you receive energy and how do you send energy to others? Those are all the things that we need to really focus on and say and understand that those are signals, like the computer has signals that are going in through the keyboard and the mouse and the camera. We have those same signals. Computer can hear, we can hear. Computer can see with the camera, we can see. Computer can eat things, we can eat things, essentially the keyboard, right?
Yeah.
Computer can speak out to the speakers, we can speak out through our mouth, and we can touch things through the mouse. So then we can touch with, so computer has those senses as well, but behind the scene, computer has sense of time. It's making sure the zeros and ones happen on the time. So we have to understand that through our life, for our healing, what are we doing with these 10 senses, and how are we signaling our DNA? The signals that the DNA responds to will produce those chemicals and those proteins that you're going to feel emotionally and physically. So that's the pathway. Signals go in, DNA senses that, like me sending the signal to the computer, computer senses it, puts out a thing on the screen. We have the same thing. Our
That's interesting.
our DNA is the software receives the signals, and then it prints out a chemical that you can feel, protein that you can feel or sense, or it makes your entire body out of it. So that pathway is a very unique pathway because it incorporates the brain and the thoughts. What you think turns on what your different genes in your body that corresponds to those thoughts. So our words that we say are the words that we are also hearing back. It turns ourselves on based on the words that we say. So it's a different way of looking at precision medicine and really practicing in a way where we are helping just understand, educate that hey, if you eat a banana compared to tobacco, you're going to have different effects in your body. It's that simple.
Yeah, I'd never heard anybody, explain the other five senses that you did. That's interesting thought process.
Yeah, you
I
don't
will
control
tell
your
I
heart rate, but you can control your heart rate, right? There are a lot of
Yeah.
yogis and monks that can control the time.
Yeah.
They can walk on. People who are remote viewers, right? What do? They control space and they're able to see things in the present time. Then there are other remote viewers who control space and time. They can go beyond in future, or they can look at the past and understand that space where they haven't actually gone, they can actually see
Hmm.
in future. Does that make sense? There are medical intuitives who can see beyond your skin, inside your body, and they can really sense it and see it. So there are people who are able to there are case studies of people who can hear vibrations. There are kids who there was one kid who was blind, but he can magically hear and see everything through his sounds.
Yeah.
But it's just a signal. The program is still a program. How does the signal get there doesn't really matter, right? Nowadays, you can have a phone and you can do gestures, and the phone will do the same thing that it once used to do with like a Nokia flip phone, right? Now you can literally talk to your computer through ChatGPT and other ways. and the AI automation, and the computer will still do the same turning on and turning off of all the function that we used to do with a mouse, right? You can shut off this window, but just by saying, "Hey Siri, do this," and it will do that. You know, so
Yeah.
it's about how the signals go in. The program is going to turn on one way or the other as long as the signal reaches there. Signals can go in many ways.
So the signals that we're talking about, that refers to our body. I mean, we're looking at, sights and sounds and what we eat and the environment around us. And if you get into the other five senses that you were talking about,
Yeah.
it really gets down to even what we think about, and all those things have a factor in it. So how can you, from a DNA side of things, how to use DNA testing and stuff to help that? How are you looking at DNA test results and going, you know what, I think I need to go this route? I would assume it sounds like the DNA testing results is like you're actually seeing the code of the program. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we are getting the code of the program when we test somebody through DNA. And I've been doing this for past 6+ years with different companies and whatnot. And now we have our own, but what we and I still use other companies as well. So what happens is when we look at the DNA code, then if you're a coder, just like in a computer sense, you really have to go get a good coder to code a program. Otherwise, you're not going to have a good website or you're not going to have a good program. Similarly, the outcome of the website, which you see, is dependent on how things are coded and what the code was and how we manipulate the code. So if you think of me as a coder or a manipulator of the coder code, you know, then I am using all these 10 senses to guide patients through so that they can manipulate their code and change it. Because you and I are getting mutations every single day, but not all of those mutations are ending up in cancer,
Right.
right? Our body has ability to fix it right away, instantly, in real time. If something happens, fix it because it knows what to do. But things that we've gotten from our ancestors, do we know what to do with it? Or have we just accepted that as that is what it is? I got it from my dad, so I must endure the pain of it. Like, do we think that? Most of us think hereditary things are there to stay.
Yeah.
I think I have a hypothesis that says potentially through these epigenetic variations and epigenetic signaling, and it's called epi because it's outside the genes. It's not the genes, it's the senses. Through these senses, if we're able to really see an effect change, does it change the DNA? Potentially it does. There are some scientists who are saying those kind of things, and potentially we don't know. We have to prove it. There's a lot of data and a lot of testing that has to be done to say, hey, look, epigenetic changes changed my DNA.
So if I understand epigenetics correctly, especially for those will be watching as well that may not know, epigenetics, if I understand correctly, that is all the things around the DNA in the sense of the environment, everything that could interact with it, but it almost, I'm gonna really dumb it down, Ace, and so I apologize, but it's almost like you have a dimmer switch on the wall that you can turn up and down, so you can actually have a gene become more active or less active or whatever it needs to be done based off of the environment around us. Is that correct?
Right, right.
Okay.
So based for a particular gene, so we went from DNA to a gene.
Yeah,
So DNA is the whole program. Gene is just a particular part of the program.
it's the line of the code,
The
right?
line
It's like
that
yeah,
does
yeah.
one thing or the other. So each gene can be broken down into even smaller zeros and ones to all the way down to um, our nucleotides in our genes and codons to see what every single line is doing. So if you think of a large code, a language model, an actual just a code, let's say the entire page is a gene, but every single line on it is a codon, every single letter is a nucleotide. So it kind of goes smaller and smaller and smaller, but all of those things are connected somewhere, right? Like when a programmer writes the program in those codes, how is that program connecting it with the hardware, right? When you install a
Yeah.
program to the computer, how is that program getting connected? How is it responding to my clicks on my cursor or my keyboard? Similarly, for us, all of these things that are outside the program are called epigenetics. The program is one
Okay.
thing, computer, screen, TV, keyboard, mouse, cameras, everything else is epigenetics. It's outside the genes, sending signals, allow us, it gives us an ability to turn on and off like a dimmer switch, each individual page of the program.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So I completely agree with you. And we need to understand in the most simplified manner when I do these kind of tests, and then we verify to say if somebody had a high risk for, let's say, pancreatitis on our genetic panel, then I'm going to look at amylase, lipase, insulin. I'm going to look at those things in the body, the things that um, I'm going to look at those in the stool as well, pancreatic enzymes in the stool, to see if our gene indication that says, hey, you have an insufficient pancreatic enzyme production, is that true? Like what the program is written, is that really showing up? You can have an entire program, right? Like right now in the computer sense, you can have a whole book long worth of program of 100-page long. But you can also have part of a program that's inactivated. It never turns on,
So
right?
your DNA,
Unless
so
you're
your
saying,
DNA could say, sorry, I'm just so your DNA could say I have a higher likelihood of pancreatitis, to use your example, but it doesn't mean you're going to have that.
right?
It just says
Because-
it's there. It's just something for us to watch for. Is that right?
Mhm. Right. So, for example, like my Apple computer right now, when you open up a Chrome, um, or when you open up the Zoom call, right? There's so many tabs on there, so many buttons on there. Do
Mm-hmm.
all of them work all the time? No.
Right.
There are criteria that have to be met for that part of the program to get activated. The program that create the software Zoom, for example, has so many buttons, so many things, but not all of them turn on unless X, Y, and Z thing happen. If this happens, then this. If this happens, then this. If this happens, then this. It's the yes and no's, right? So similarly, in our body, we have programs, we have genes, but doesn't mean they have to be turned on. And
Right.
if they are turned on, then I'm going to see the outcome of it. I'm going to see the chemicals being produced in the blood. I'm going to see the downstream effect of that outcome. So if the Zoom software is on, for example, and somebody has turned on their mic, and while I'm talking, if that part of the program is also on, well, their sound is also going to come through the mic, and it's going to interfere with my sound, and it's going to delay our. It's going to create some disturbance in our presentation. So those disturbances are what I'm looking for. I'm looking for those signs and signals in the blood once we have risks identified. DNA can give us certain risk analysis. It can tell us whether or not you have this or that risk. And then you prove it. Once you prove it, then you treat it. And once you treat it, then it should get better. And essentially, what we're saying in a computer language code is, let's say hypothetically that this pancreatitis gene is on and pancreatic enzymes are elevated. and you're feeling stomach pain and have pancreatitis. Okay? Let's say that these genes are on.
Okay.
What is turning on these genes? What are all the yeses and nos that the program had to feel, all the signals that had to go into the pancreas, into that DNA to turn on or turn off, either way, either elevate, increase your enzymes or decrease your enzyme. But in the case of pain, you might have more increase in the enzymes. What led to that, right? We need to know all those signals. And what if, through our epigenetic work, what if we change these signals? What if somebody who is alcoholic stops drinking alcohol and stops turning off the pancreas, right? And affecting the pancreas. What if somebody who loves eating fatty food stops eating fatty food and stops getting triglycerides and other fatty buildup in the pancreas, right? What if somebody who lives out in the farms and pesticide filled world and or in the ocean in the water rich area where there are a lot of parasites, what if that person stops being in that and stops getting exposed to chemicals and parasites? What if they stop going to the pancreas, right? What if the signals are completely gone? Would you still have the DNA turned on? If the signals go away, then there's nothing that
You
turns
you
on.
would think you would think from a programmer standpoint, because I'm going back to your computer analogy,
Yeah,
then that switch would be turned off because you're not pushing the button. Is that
exactly.
right?
If you don't push the
Okay.
mic on, then there is no interference, right? You can only hear one person's sound. If both of us are talking at the same time, then there's going to be interference because that part of the program is on and that
Yeah.
overlaps. So that's what we're doing with human body and understanding the signals, understanding the DNA, understanding the outcomes, and proving it with labs, and then saying, if this is your symptoms, then why don't we change the epigenetics and then recheck, essentially getting rid of this initial signaling that started the domino in the first place, right? All the
Right.
dominoes started falling. We are essentially turning that first signals off, so that way we don't get we don't get the disease state or outcome. But all of those things take time. All of those things have to be proven, and we have to repeat some of these labs to see if we are able to do that.
Yeah. So it sounds like right now, I mean, where we're at today, it's testing for DNA for a real medical test,
Yeah,
not genetics, not a genealogical test, but a medical DNA test
yeah,
can be almost a game changer to help identify some of those things that then you can go in as a doctor and go back and test for those areas that the red flags were raised. Is that right?
yeah, yeah. Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly right. If somebody has a red flag for, and the importance of it is this, right? I'm kind of bringing back this whole connection to it. Is
Yeah.
that if somebody has diabetes, we already check their labs, right? We do yearly labs all the time. Let's say somebody comes in with diabetes. They already have diabetes. We already know the medications and lifestyle changes that they have to make. Okay, then what's the point of testing the DNA, right? What's the point
Right.
of testing the DNA if you're already going to change the epigenetics? Well, the point is that if some of those genes that play a role in creating the diabetes, because diabetes can be many different types,
That makes sense.
then we have to know, what are we really addressing? Are we putting an emphasis on A or B or C or D? There are like 10 different types of Parkinson's. Which one is it? Right? Did you get diabetes because of a parasitic infection? Or did you get diabetes because of a cancer? Or did you get diabetes because of nighttime late eating and then drinking at night? Or did somebody get diabetes because they can't tolerate proteins? They don't have the genes to digest proteins, so all they can eat is sugar and fat. Or they can't tolerate fat, so then all they can eat is proteins and sugars. Like, what is it? Where did the diabetes come from? Can be rooted inside this gene, and the gene testing can help us understand the speed at which things are happening. So if
Yeah.
certain things are happening like a dimmer switch, if it's happening at the highest brightness, then you might need the highest amount of commitment in the dose for certain treatment to work.
Okay.
And
That
same thing
makes
with
sense.
minerals and vitamins. Or if it's happening at a low, then you can get away by doing a little bit. And that's why some people it's easy to reverse diabetes, while in others it's not, because we're not really understanding the real root cause of diabetes from a genetic and a pathological sense. And
Yeah.
once you understand it, then it's kind of easy, because you just test and treat and prove it by retesting it.
Well, that's interesting. Let me. We're coming short. We're coming up on our end time here, but I have a couple more questions that have to do with DNA testing,
Yeah, go ahead.
and I hope that I could at least ask them of you real quick. First of all, I mean, there are so many DNA tests out there that someone can jump online and fill out, and I don't care what company it is. There's you could do a Google search and pull up 15 companies that say they do medical DNA testing. What do you think are some of the misconceptions that people might have about testing?
Yeah.
And then how best do they need to, if they're looking at doing a medical DNA test, how do they evaluate which one's going to work best for them and their doctor?
Okay. So the biggest piece of the puzzle is that we don't want the first thing you want to know is no guesswork data. You don't
Okay,
want guesswork data. You don't want
right,
imputed data. So any testing company that you are looking at, you want to look at, are they imputing the data? What does that mean? It means that they're only testing for a smaller number of variants and genes, but then they're guessing the data for everything else. It's like saying, hey, just because you have a right eye with brown pupil, it's almost 100% chance, supposedly, that you also have a left eye with a brown pupil as well. But that may not be true. You might have a dark ring around your left eye and not the right eye.
right.
It might be a whole different story. Your left hand and right hand might be totally different. So in
So there's
the
companies out there that are doing their testing, and they're testing for certain things. And if I'm understanding correctly, there it reminds me of what you're saying. Reminds me of the movie Jurassic Park,
yeah,
right? I don't know if you've ever saw that, Ace,
I've
but
seen
at the very beginning when Mr. Hammond, I think was his name, the actor, whoever was that started Jurassic Park, he's talking about how they have the DNA from this dinosaur, and then they're guessing the pieces to tie in to make a dinosaur from a frog DNA or whatever. And so it sounds like to me what you're saying is they're testing and they're seeing like A F M Q, down through the alphabet, and they're going, okay, wait a minute, then let's put the B, C, D. We're gonna have these. We're gonna fill this in because we know that's the way the alphabet goes, but it may not always fit.
right, right,
Okay,
exactly. So they're guessing the data. I mean, we have. So here's a fallacy, or we just have to understand this. In the sequencing world, we haven't identified the entire full genome. It's impossible because when the sequencer only reads about 150 or some base pairs at a time, and we have millions,
okay,
millions. So then you have to align everything according to some data that's out there. So you have to kind of align it and say, okay, in chromosome one, two, three, four, this is what's on each chromosome. But even of the readable data, because the DNA has to be placed in a solution so that it can be read, it breaks apart the cysteine bonds. So the nucleotide chains that we are reading, we are only able to read some chains. We're not reading things with cysteine or sulfur bondage in it. So it's very important to know that when we find a company, and plus human DNA, we're only measuring about 3% of it. That's the active DNA. 97% of the human DNA is so-called junk DNA. So we're not even looking at the junk DNA. Most of the companies are not looking at them. We may be looking at them. We can be looking at them. And over time, we may understand that the junk DNA has certain risk or certain powers for certain people. if they do this epigenetic things, right? If they live this way, then the junk DNA helps them or not. So now you have a whole, let's say, 100% DNA, only 3% of it is getting tested, and we call that the full genome or full exome DNA. With that full active DNA, we have 50 to 200 million variants in them. And you know how many companies are testing not even 1 million of it? Not even 5% of that 3%? 99.9% of the companies.
Wow.
99.9% of the companies today are not even measuring 5% of the 3%. So they're not even measuring 0.15, right?
Yeah, I
That's
was going to say, I'm doing the
0.15.
math in my head going, wow, that's a little tiny number.
Yeah, so they're not even measuring 0.15% of the entire DNA. And yet they claim that they measured all 26,000 genes and they're going to tell you what your risk factors are. That's not how this works. You want to know exactly what you have and then look at the odds ratio and relative risk ratio after that, right? How
Yeah.
accurate is it? And as the science changes, are you updating that data, right? So we are updating that data in my lab, and the patients who get, I test all 50 million variants because that's the research that we have
Yeah.
available. And then when we give that report back where there's no imputation, zero, I test. If you have it, I will tell you. It's that simple. There's
So
no guess.
your lab is testing 50 million genes and
No,
no
no, there are
guessing.
only 26,000 genes.
No,
There are 50 million
variants.
variants.
Variants. I
Yeah,
said genes, but I meant variants in my head.
right.
Um, and no guessing at that point. You're not. You're just
No,
saying, here's what it is.
here's what it is. And here's the research that says that you have certain risk because of you have this variant.
Wow.
So here's how I describe genes. Genes are like cities, and variants are like houses in the city.
Okay.
So if I was scanning the United States and I look for White House, just one White House, right? And I find one White House in, and I say, oh, I found this one house. That means it's Washington, D.C. Well, what if I'm looking for Disney World or something that looks like Disney? Or what if I find Six Flags, something that looks like Six Flags? Are all Six Flags Philadelphia? No. Are all
Right.
Six Flags Los Angeles or all Disneyland or Disney World Los Angeles or Orlando? No. Right? So similarly, we can't just skim less than 0.015% or 0.15% of the DNA.
Yeah.
Most companies are doing maybe 25, 30, 300, 500, 1,000, 10,000. I know a company that does 100,000, and I know a company that does a million. But everybody's doing just bare few minimum. It's like 0.015% or less,
Yeah.
right? And then that's where we sorry, that's where we have this outcome that we have to understand that we really need to look at all the cities. If you look at all the cities, then you know that all of these cities belong to this gene, which is the city. Sorry, we look at all the
The
houses.
houses. Yeah.
All the houses belong to this city, and this city belongs to this DNA, which is the country, right? So we really need to look at those numbers. Any company, every company is allowed to, and they're supposed to say online whether they do imputed data or not. So you can easily look that up. Just type in the name of the company and type in imputation data, and then it'll show up. The other thing
Okay.
is a lot of the companies are putting their data that they scan on the AI models and essentially having the computer give you a serum recommendation. In my world, I actually guide most of my patients through online coaching. Or if I'm going to give my recommendation, then it's going to be me who's going to give you
Yeah.
the recommendation. And our job is to take those recommendations and talk to, if somebody else is doing it, then talk to your provider. Talk to somebody else who has some experience in doing that kind of disease management. And if you're able to do that, then it works out really well because The data doesn't go into some third world, third party somewhere else. I don't put any data. If I do anything with the I only put everybody's barcoded, so we don't even have the names of the people.
Okay.
Um, so everything is secure, it's off the grid. It's not even connected to the internet, so it's sitting somewhere. The entire server and the and the programs are computers are sitting in some remote location where it's not connected to an internet. So it's everything is stored in one place, and when we run the data, we only take a look at the risk uh, title. So let's say you have a pancreatitis risk, we'll just look at the pancreatitis but not look at the actual particular detailed DNA data, right?
Yeah.
Once I already know that somebody has high pancreatitis risk, then the epigenetic recommendations are based off of reversing the pancreatitis and making sure that if there are any other variants that play a role, we address those as well. So that's where the recommendation gets created based off of looking at all of these millions of variants, and the treatment protocols are or recommendations are a little bit more precise than
Yeah.
just blood testing, because what's in the blood doesn't represent what's in the tissue. The vitamin D that you have in the blood doesn't represent the vitamin D that's inside the cells and the tissue. It's just highway. What's floating in the highway doesn't matter what's compared to what needs to be inside the house. So we look at all of those things and really just, it's an attempt to create a more safe, precise, epigenetic treatment treatment recommendations that are more holistic, natural, and to some degree spiritual.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one last question, and then we'll kind of wrap things up.
Sure.
Is what advice would you give someone who's considering having their DNA tested?
So the first thing is you want to do your research. Number one, I mean, there are a lot of companies that will put in a lot of money into marketing and make things look really sexy. But just do your research and make sure that your data isn't getting shared on some AI platform, and some data and what you're getting is what you're paying for, right?
Hmm.
You're not getting duped into thinking imputed data, is
Is real
okay.
data? Yeah.
I mean, yes, I mean the scientists will say that it's 99% accurate. Okay, but 1% inaccuracy means my entire life can change with that 1%. you
Yeah.
know so I'm a little more conservative in that approach. Some people may not be. So if it makes sense for you to do it, then go ahead. Look for if there's guidance that is by a medical doctor, by a holistic doctor, by somebody who looks at your entire mind, body, and spirit. And is that guidance provided to you? Is it affordable? Is it reasonable? Is it cheap? Is it free? What is the next step after doing the testing, right? So if you're being guided, is the guidance easy to follow? Is it in stepwise approach? Step one, do this. Step two, do this. Step three, do this. Step four, do this. Is it as simple as that, or is it all convoluted and the recommendations are just whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, anybody can tell me to go exercise and run. Like, does that mean anything to me? Like, I do gene specific workouts and diets, right? My patients come in and I test them, and I can tell you whether you have high protein, fats, or carbs machines in your body that will digest which energy source better. So, people who do keto diet but they don't have fat genes, they're not going to get any benefit out of eating a lot of fat,
I
because they
think
don't
I need.
have
I think I
these.
need to share my DNA testing results with you, Ace.
They're not. I
So
mean, that's the thing, right? That's what we are attempting and doing,
yeah.
to see if we have any understanding of our diet, our exercise. So my NBA players, I talk to their coaches, and we literally change their out, or like the way that they're behaving. If they spend more time into the weightlifting, and they don't have a lot of high protein genes, but they have more carb genes, then I'm going to tell them to go run more because that's a carb loaded exercise, right? If they have
Okay.
a lot more fatty genes, then I'm going to tell them to fast more, do your exercise in the morning and rest in the evening, right? The entire protocol completely changes based on your genetic makeup. And those guys have become NBA champions and Olympic gold medalists. My
Yeah.
patients have done that. So it's like, and we're seeing the outcome. So for somebody who's looking into it, I would say compare and contrast. If you want to look at our test, then you're welcome to check it out at um, I think acemyhealth.me, and the coaching is on acemyhealth.us. So
Yeah, I'll make certain we have links in the description so
yeah,
that people they want to go in, they can actually just click there and go
yeah,
go check both out,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Definitely. So
Those are two different platforms. One is a coaching platform, the other one is a genetic testing platform. You need both of them. They're extremely inexpensive compared to what other people are charging, compared to by any metrics, by any data with any comparative genetic test today. We have we are the lowest, right? Like we're
okay,
charging the lowest compared to anybody else for what we're giving,
for the amount of data that
for
you're
the
giving,
amount of
yeah,
data and the
yeah,
guidance. So it's really simple. You do it. It's a cheek swab. You send it off. And our process is following what you earlier mentioned is the culture. ACE is the process. Affirming, confirming, and then experiencing. You affirm it with a test, confirm it with epigenetic work, and you experience a magical outcome. So that's founded in scriptures, that's talked about in Philippians 6, 7, and 8. It's mentioned in Hinduism and Gita, and it's mentioned in Judaism and Buddhist texts. The principles are very simple. You create an architectural blueprint, you test and figure that out. Then you work, you wait for the building to get made, and then you experience living in it. So it's affirming, confirming, and experiencing your true health.
that's awesome.
So
Well,
that's
Ace,
how we do it.
thank you so much. This has been really informative. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and while you and I have had an opportunity to visit, several times,
Yeah.
I really grasped some new stuff. Just I really enjoyed the way you use the analogies of whether it's a computer or a White House or whatever it is to help understand. So I kind of view you as somebody that has that true heart of a teacher. Let me explain things in a way that is simple enough that even the old firefighter can pick up on. So I so appreciate that. So
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I try my best.
yes,
It's the analogies that make sense because the macro environment of how we behave and what we see in the cosmos is directly mirrored in our micro environment. And that is why we say that we were made in mirror image of God, right? We are made, you have to look at the mirror. Like if I put my phone up here and there's a mirror and you can see that reflection of light.
uh-huh.
And if I cover the mirror up, either with a white coat or a black coat, but you can call it whatever you want. But if you cover the mirror up, you're not going to see that light, right?
Right,
So our job is to open this mirror and allow the reflection of this spiritual, godly, divine, God's energy, and maybe God Himself, right? Allow that to reflect. And how do we do that, right? We do that by being aware and discerning of not letting these black curtains close it. I can easily see negative things in anybody. But am I seeing the negatives? Am I seeing the black curtain or the white curtain if they sugarcoat it as being good? Right? Nowadays, satanic things are also good things, right? So they can sugarcoat it, but we have to open that. We have to see the real light behind it and
right,
focus on it to open that even more. So, how do you open it? How do you exude that light? Through your behavior, through your words, through your actions, through how you think. All of these 10 senses allow us to not only take in signals, but also give signals to the outside world. How I see a person who is not of the same faith or the same background, do I see them as anything different than me? Or do I see them as they were also made in God's image, and I just need to see the God in them, right? I
Correct.
just need to see that they are also exuding and emanating positivity and God through their behavior. Even like nobody's always bad, right? People are bad to some people, but then there those same bad people are good to some other people. So what are we really focusing on? So the words that we choose to express to our friends and family and people around us is literally, I think, one of the most important thing that we can decide, and we can decide to exude, emanate, positivity and love
Yeah.
and kindness and joy, because those genes are going to get turned on.
It's
It's a
just
very selfish thing, right? It's not about other person. It's literally very selfish because you want to turn those genes on so you can feel those things.
right.
If you don't
Right.
turn them on, then you're not going to feel them. But with that said, we
All
got to
right.
cut it.
Thank
Um,
you very much. I sure
I
appreciate
appreciate
it.
you. Yeah, I appreciate you very much. Thank you for taking this time and setting this up. I know it takes a lot of effort and to do these podcasts and keep it going. So if you need anything, let me know. I will be more than happy to help in future.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Take
So
care, guys.
everyone, thank you so much. That was Dr. Ace, kind of shedding some light on just the fascinating connection between functional medicine, DNA, and health. I hope this episode has empowered you to explore the possibilities of personalized healthcare. And I'll put the links and things to Ace's practice and the
And
DNA tests.
you can also put the Instagram link is there.
Okay.
Ace DRACE.md. Dr.
Okay.
Ace.md.
We'll make sure that's there as well.
Thank you.
So
Take
thank
care.
you.